All right, we are live. Hi, everyone. This is Sheila Kamara Hay of Ecstatic Birth, and I'm so happy to be back doing these conversations to transform birth in the new year, which feels so full of possibilities. And one of the things I'm really, really passionate about is giving voice in this platform to women who have had really beautiful, empowering, and pleasurable births. And I'm really, really excited to have a woman here with me today, Charlotte Eastaugh, who had a birth that I am using my words here that felt ecstatic, orgasmic, and divine. I've read her birth story, and I'm so excited to have her join me here today with her little one to share about her birth. Hi, Charlotte.
Hi, Sheila. Thank you so much for having me here.
I'm so happy to have you, and I'm so happy Silver decided to join us. His face is just, delicious. So, as I was saying, like I'm really, really passionate about having women share positive birth stories, because when I'm out there talking about ecstatic birth, sharing about ecstatic birth, even in places where I feel like my voice is pretty loud and, the birth community has an understanding of these things, there's always the snarky comments. What do you mean? My birth was so painful. What are you, crazy lady? Right? All of that. And so I think it's a really big job to start to bring forward like that reclamation of what being birth can actually be, and starting to raise that awareness and consciousness. And from what you've shared with me about your birth, it was a beautiful, divine, really, really conscious experience. So I just want to give you the floor, Charlotte, to share your birth story in whatever way feels good to you.
Thank you, Sheila. Thank you so much for having me here as well. And yeah, like you said, I feel an honor to be able to bring actually a really positive and divine and ecstatic birthing experience to people. And I'm such a fan of your work, and I think it's so important what you're doing. Thank you, Silver. I think it's just such amazing messaging that you're doing, and it really inspired me on my journey, as did these conversations, to transform birth and listening to other women sharing their inspirational birth stories. So it feels, really amazing to have come full circle and to be here myself sharing with Silver. We didn't know that he was going to join us, but he knew it was about him. He wanted to be part of the show.
Totally. He seems so present and intrigued by the whole thing. All right, so tell us all the juicy details, what you were hoping for, what you actually experienced, like take us through it.
Well, I think I could say, like, probably it started really, so birth, I have two beautiful boys, and when I was pregnant with my first son, Oni, I really wanted to have a home birth. And in fact, we had, me and my husband, many years ago, or maybe 8 years ago, we built a yurt together around like traditional Mongolian tent, and we actually lived in that for a few years, but now it's at the bottom of the garden. And when I was preparing for my birth with Oni, my first son, I knew that I really wanted to birth in the yurt. This was a sacred space for me that we'd put so many hours of love in, we'd lived in the woods. It was really a magical space where I felt super connected. And that was really my dream, was to birth him in this space. And I came, labour started right on, I think, the day after my due date, and everything was going well. But when we spoke to the midwives, we have the support with the NHS midwives who do support women with home births in this area. I think around the country it depends. But really, unfortunately, there was actually no midwife on duty that day. Somebody had been ill. And we really held out as long as possible. My husband was amazing on the phone, just advocating for them to find somebody from the hospital to send out. And unfortunately, there just wasn't anyone available. So we had to jump ship on the home birth plans and go down to the Norfolk and Norwich Hospital. And I was very fortunate. I had a beautiful birthing experience there in the midwife-led birth unit in water. But, like many people, there was a few details that were out of my hands. We had to be separated after birth. We had to be monitored. And that was very, very difficult for me. That was really, heartbreaking in those moments, and I'm sure there are many women that have shared that experience also. But when I was preparing for Silver's birth, I really wanted to put in all the groundwork that I could make this home birth happen. And, you know, for so many of us, 2020 has been a crazy, crazy, crazy year with so much unexpected things happen. And I think sort of more than ever, it just was affirmative of, you want to be in your space that feels sacred and safe, where you feel connected, where you feel, you know, empowered in your own body, empowered in the choices that you're making. And so I really wanted to, you know, cover all bases that were going to help support me with this vision, basically. And this yurt space was also where I practiced yoga, and this is where I would go to escape from the madness of being mother of a toddler. And, you know, he would come in there and do yoga with me too, and it looks out of this meadow, and it was really where I could feel connected to the wild. And this is something that's so important to me, and being in this space of connection with the wild, I really feel fuels my essence. You know, when life is getting too much, and you know, life with young children, there's mess everywhere, and it's just, you know, it can be chaotic and things. Like, for me, like, getting out into the wild just feels like so ultimately nourishing. And so yeah.
I have to say, he's stealing the show. He's getting all kinds of like cutesy comments in the chat. He's adorable. Yeah, I just want to highlight one thing you said before you continue, which is, like, you really picked a space that felt like sacred to you, and that you felt really connected spiritually, really supported in all these different ways, a space that felt that you felt surrounded by love. And I just wanted to reflect that back, because, you know, for you it was the yurt, for others it might be somewhere else, but to have that consciousness to pick a space where your body, like your animal body, feels really like safe and loved and connected and supported is such a big piece.
Exactly, such a big piece. So yeah, that's exactly it. So this time I was like, okay, let's, you know, we're going to prepare for this. Me and my husband spoke about finding a doula that could support us, and this feeling like an amazing sort of safety net in the event that, well, whatever, you know, it's just amazing to have the support of somebody that really knows birth with you and that is there just for you, on top of the support of the midwives, which we were so lucky to have. And yeah, just one thing in that kind of side of things about preparing with the team, and actually it was, it might have even been actually in one of the conversations to transform birth that I had watched. It was mentioning, like, you know, really make sure that you feel super safe. It's not just in the place that you are choosing to birth, but obviously the team that you're choosing to birth with. And, you know, because of what happened the time before, I really felt like the more that I could do to ensure that, you know, some things you can prepare for, some things you can't. Yeah. That's the thing. You don't know what's going to happen with birth. You don't know where it's going to take you. Yeah. And with all of the COVID situation, it actually transpired that at one point that the support team that I had with the midwives, that particular unit, were, the home birthing service was a little bit ropey, as it had been at the time when my first son was born. And when I made contact with my doula, she actually let me know that another hospital was perhaps had a more robust service. And in fact, I'm gonna thank Paula here, my doula, because she not only was an amazing doula to me, but she also campaigned hard for this home birthing service at the King's Lynn Queen Elizabeth Hospital. And when I made contact with them, and this was 36 weeks, so I was quite far into my pregnancy at this point, and I was really wanting to make sure that I had, you know, all corners covered in terms of supporting my birthing experience. They were amazing, and, you know, suddenly I felt like another layer of, I can work with this. These people understand what I'm hoping for, and they are trusting me, and they want to support me with this.
Yeah.
And I felt like they said to me that there was only one time that they weren't able to turn up in the whole history of their home birthing experience. So, you know,
I just want to pop in and celebrate you here, and also just say to anyone who's about to have their first birth, if you're watching this. So, what Charlotte's describing, commonly you see in second time mothers, where they had planned for a certain type of birth experience and then it didn't really play out the way that they had wished it could. It might have still been a good experience, like you had, Charlotte. And for others, like for me, it was not a good experience. And so the second time around, you're like, I will leave no rock unturned. I will make sure that I am so well supported. I will make sure that even if this happens, I can still be supported in this way. And if this happens, I can still be supported in that way. And it's such a beautiful thing to witness, because what it really feels like, it's like the rising up of the mother, like that power from within. And I just want to say, like, especially to any first time moms, like, don't wait until you have that experience that you didn't want to have. Like, you can advocate as fiercely for yourself now. I see a lot of first time moms not feeling like justified in advocating to that extent, or kind of doing what I did when I was a first time mom, and kind of like wishing upon a star that everything will go well. And as Charlotte shared, like, there's always going to be surprises. Things are not going to go as planned. And so the more you can think about like all those different rabbit holes and prepare for them, the better off you'll be. And of course, like you shared, having a support team that you feel really supported by, really held by, is so important.
yeah, absolutely. Completely, you've hit the nail on the head there. And I think what I realized, you know, second time round, like you said, the more work that I could do with preparing all of the safety nets, you know, the plan A, the plan B, the plan C, the more relaxed and safe I'm going to feel when everything starts, and also in those days running up to it. And it can really allow you to let go and move into your body in the way that birth requires us to really drop deep into our body and out of the mind, because it's not a mind experience, it's our body that's going to guide us through this journey. And so it felt really good to make these plans. And another layer of that, of the support team, I really decided this time that I would love to have my mother there. And so inviting her into the team was really precious, and being able to share my hopes and dreams for the birth with her, and also to be able to walk through some of the you know, concerns that might have cropped up within that. So, you know, that was one part of the preparation to take me there. And I will also share in like you know, a run up to the whole story with the you know, I mentioned before, it'd been a really tough year with lockdown, with COVID. I lost a really dear friend at the beginning of the year, and there was a lot going on. I had huge pelvic pain in my pregnancy, which I had experienced in my first. And I really felt like this year, every single chapter, it felt like I was being asked to let go of something else, you know, my friend, the support of the friends and family around me with childcare with my son. My yoga practice had to change to something unrecognizable with the pelvic pain I was experiencing. All these like support systems that I knew were actually being asked to release them and to move to the next level. He's like, come on, get to the good stuff. I want to hear about the good stuff.
Tell them about when I was trying to come out. Tell them about that piece.
So let's go to that piece. So I knew I wanted this, you know, this magical birth in the yurt, and I wanted a pool, because I knew that the pool had supported me so much in the birth of my first son, Oni. But when we thought about having the pool inside the yurt, it felt a little bit too crowded, you know? So I was like, okay, well, what about having it outside on the deck, which he was due end of August. So in England, that was like, yeah, that could be possible. We could have good weather and that could be possible. Or it could, you know, we could not be supported in that way. We just really didn't know. So there was quite a lot of preparation or thought going into that kind of thing. And I think I mentioned in one of my emails, I was like, in those days running up, I was tracking the weather every single day. I was looking at it, and I was just, you know, fingers crossed, like waiting for that opportunity where I just saw some a few sunny days ahead that I could have a conversation with this little being inside my room and say, like, this is the moment, we're going to go for it. And actually we had crazy storms. There were savage winds, there were trees just like ripped up, and things were wild outside and things were wild inside. There was crazy dynamics going on at home, and it was like, I'm done with being pregnant. I have this baby. And, you know, on the kind of day where I think I reached my sort of peak of exhaustion, and it was a week after his due date, I think the next day, in fact, I was being offered some support to induce. I went and rested in the yurt, and I meditated, and I did some self-love practices, and I just really restored myself. And I just, you know, I moved my body, I listened to some beautiful music, and I just filled myself up with love. And something that I'd been practicing in this whole wild year that we'd had was really like meditating in the arms of the Great Mother, and just letting her hold me, and just, you know, feeling all the stuff that was going on, but just letting her hold me, and just using that as a way of really nourishing me in this moment where I was holding so much.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. I just, you know, I gave myself to her in that moment. And I went for a walk across the meadow, and on my way back, so this was the first moment that the winds had dropped down in like over a week, and as I walked back, I could feel this bearing down sensation on my cervix, and it was like, it felt different, you know, to what I've been feeling. I was like, oh, this feels like something happening, in a very gentle and even very pleasurable way. And you know, that made me smile. And I thought, okay, this is the beginning. I can feel it. And
I'm going to interrupt you with a quick question,
yeah,
because I know for some people that sensation of like pleasure in the cervix might be like a foreign thing. I'm curious, was that something you were familiar with before your pregnancy or birth, that like the feeling of like pressure on your cervix, either from within or either side, is pleasurable?
not in this particular way. Like, this was really a unique feeling that actually I hadn't really felt that. It wouldn't it was a new thing for me. It actually felt, but it did feel pleasurable. It almost felt actually like my clitoris was being stimulated in this way. And of course, like, all of our anatomy in that way is connected. And anyway, we went back, and I called my husband, who was still working. I called the team, and then I just dropped into this space. You're going to hang out for the rest of the story, sweetheart, because it's a good one. It's about you. And the rest really unraveled in this kind of ceremonial kind of spirit, where we rolled wax candles, and we mixed some aromatherapy oils that would be like supportive in the birthing experience. And my mum came, and she gave me some reflexology on my feet, and my doula arrived, and I just felt like there was so much love around me. My toddler was there. He was asking how I was doing, and I'd prepared him as well. You know, I was hoping that also he would be, you know, around for the birth. Yeah. I'd prepared him with doing like animal noises, like doing cat and tigers, and talking about, you know, when the baby comes, we're gonna call in the animals to help. And it just felt, you know, I just felt so relaxed and nourished by this warm blanket of love, by this support team around me. And everything was still very, very gentle. I was experiencing surges, but they were super, super gentle. So we said, like, let's go and all get some rest. My husband, Sam, he said, you know, let's all take some rest. So we went out into the yurt, which I had decorated. I really made it like this womb space. I draped it up with saris that I bought from India, and filled it with, you know, tokens from my friends, supportive pieces, rocks, little gifts that dear women friends of me had given me to support me through this journey. And we we lay down to sleep, and actually a few minutes later my toddler woke up inside and my mum brought him out. He wanted to be with us, so he snuggled down in the bed with us out there. And it was really as soon as Sam and my toddler Oni had closed their eyes and dropped it into sleep, you know, this is about midnight, things started to pick up. Like now I'm actually kind of on my own in my safe space, in this cocoon of the sacred space. And this was when things started picking up. The surges started increasing in intensity. They started to increase in frequency. And so I got out of the bed and I just wanted to move my body. Like that's, you know, so much of my practice is all about movement. And the surges were directing me, you know, to wanting to move, to breathe through them. And I actually had a pregnancy belly dancing video that I'd been following. And I popped that on with some headphones so I didn't wake the boys up. And I was just moving with this amazing, amazing belly dancer, and breathing and, you know, gyrating my hips, which is so great for preparation with the birth and everything. And you know, I was loving it. I was loving it. It felt amazing. I was like, this is, you know, my baby's on the way, and this is like my dream. I'm in my sacred space. My boys are just here. My mother, my doula is in the house. The midwives know they're going to come. Like I felt so held in this experience. And with that, I just felt like I could really, you know, drop into my body and my experience and the internal wisdom that was going to help me with this birthing process. And I spoke to the midwives before, and they said, you know, when you get about 3 minutes, 3 contractions, 10 minutes, you've got to bring us back, and that's when we'll come. Mm-hmm. So as they got more frequent, I kept thinking, okay, I'm going to wake Sam with the next one. I'll wake him with the next one, then he can go call the midwives. But actually it was like I was in the moment, you know, I was just so present with what was happening. I really didn't want to rush any of it. And then I thought, okay, wow, they're getting really quick now. They're getting really strong. I need to make sure that the midwives can be there. So I woke Sam as soon as I stood up to wake him. Actually, my waters broke, and I woke him, and he called the midwives, and they put me onto the phone so that they could hear, you know, how quickly things were progressing. And they were so sweet, and they said, you know, okay, so, you know, take some paracetamol. You know, we're going to come out to you now. Take some paracetamol to help with the pain. And I thought, paracetamol, like, this isn't going to, first of all, it's not going to touch the sides of what's happening, but also this is my moment. I want to feel it all. You know, this was my experience, and it's obviously different for everybody. And by this point, things had really ramped up, and they were happening fast. And as more people were starting to become involved in my experience, I didn't want to be inside any longer, and I was really called to being outside. The moon was out, the stars were shining, and I just wanted that fresh air. I was feeling hot, you know, the contractions were becoming intense, and it was something that I'd never predicted. But like this magnet, I was just pulled, boom, down onto the ground once the surges sort of peaked. And this spot underneath the oak tree outside the yurt just dragged me down like a magnet, and I had my hands in the ground, and it felt so good. It was like, you know, she knows, this amazing, you know, great mother, she knows what's going on, and she's going to hold me through this. And I had my hands in the earth, and it just felt so grounding, so supportive to, you know, it felt like however intense this gets, like she can take that.
Yeah. And it just listening to you reminds me of what you were saying earlier about when you were preparing and throughout your pregnancy, when you were having all these moments of intensity, really practicing surrendering into the arms of the Divine Mother. And so this feels like sort of the culmination of that practice in the moment of your birth, where you're recognizing that relationship between you and the earth, like on a very sensational level.
Very much so. Yeah, very much so. And it felt, yeah, incredibly nurturing. And like you say, it was a building of a relationship that I had been building in the pregnancy with these meditation practices, as well as spending time out in nature. and that was really where the rest of the birth happened. And I had the pool behind me, which Sam was filling, and he'd lit this beautiful fire just a few meters away from me. And every time I would get up, sometimes in between surges, and I even went inside the yurt to, peep at my toddler who was there. And I was just like, oh, that gave me so much strength as well. But as soon as the surge picked up, it was again, boom, back down on that spot like a magnet, pulled down there. Like that was the place for me with this little being. And my doula Paula, at one point she put her hand on my sacrum and she said, you're not going to make it into the pool, Charlotte. Things are really moving. Like his head is, because your sacrum lifts up like a flap almost to allow your pelvis to expand for this, for this baby to come through. And she could already feel that happening. And I thought, wow, I still had a long way to go because it had been quick,
Yeah.
And when she said this, I felt inside of me and I could feel his head. And I thought, wow, this is it. He's coming. This is like, we're not messing around here. He's coming. And by this time, things really were, things were feeling pretty intense and strong. And it was like, as I realized how far along we were as well, like you were talking about this surrender, I just, I wanted to surrender. And I think the whole time, as the surges or contractions were building, and especially with the work that we were doing, I was wanting to like get curious. What does that feel like? And also celebrating the fact that I knew what these amazing contractions are doing is opening up my cervix and changing the shape of my uterus to allow my baby to come through. So surrendering to this intensity and welcoming it. And this wonderful massage therapist I've gone to before, she talked about a cave as a visualization.
Mm-hmm.
And I really worked with that actually, because this opening into this, dark cave really. And but yeah, as things sort of intensified and I realized that he was traveling, like this was happening. We were going into transition, and things, at this point get incredibly intense. And this is when often, we really kind of lose the focus of and the ability to contain the amount of energy going on in this experience. And this is when I discovered something which I am really excited to share with everybody. And I'm also really curious to know if anybody else has had this experience, because it was not something I had heard about before, but actually something that you had said to me, Sheila, prompted this action in me, which she'd said something to me about the preparation and birth of knowing the things that bring you pleasure and using those, and that had really resonated with me in all the preparation I had done. And in this moment when I felt so much pressure on my cervix, so much, the intensity and the amount of energy there is just overwhelming. And this point where I thought, okay, this is totally overwhelming, I held my chest, I held my breath, I put my hand to my heart. And what happened in this moment was this rocket of energy that came up from the cervix into my heart and then up into my head. And it was like, this is what ecstatic birth means to me, because I was laughing. And I was, this was, orgasmic doesn't even kind of describe it. This was like, I felt it was a transcendental experience. I felt in this moment this redirecting of energy. It went up into my heart, into my brain, and out of my crown. And it was totally it was an elevated experience. Sweetheart. Okay.
Oh my gosh, Charlotte, that is such a beautiful, thank you for sharing that, because I know that probably feels like a very intimate moment in your birth. And I love that you had the courage and the vulnerability to share that, because that's the sort of thing people really need to hear and understand, you know, even something as basic as, like, I was really tracking you through your birth story. Like, you did such a phenomenal job of using pleasure throughout, when you were talking about, you know, the fabrics that you put in the yurt, when you were talking about like the tokens from different friends to support you. Like, it can be that simple. And then also like this act of just giving yourself like that holding, that pleasure, that act of exploring your connection to nature, which it sounds like that's a very big part of your life. Movement, which, you know, as an acro yoga teacher, is also a very big part of your life. You're dancing, like all of these ways. What happens a lot of times in birth is there is so much energy, there's so much pulsing energy, that in and of itself is frightening. It's so frightening, and that causes people to clamp down. And so if you can find a way, the way you did, to like kind of dance with the energy, surrender to the energy, play with the energy, transmute the energy into pleasure, it can take you into these otherworldly realms, which it sounds like, you know, you really experienced on so many different levels. So beautiful.
Yeah, thank you, Sheila. I think that really encapsulates so much of the tools that did really support me. And I went, you know, like you said, I went to town with it. I really did, to the point where I was, you know, I questioned myself at some point, thinking, you know, you're taking this to the extreme in terms of, you know, dressing the space and all this. But also I thought, I might not ever have another child, and this feels supportive to me, this feels nourishing to me. Like, I'm going to, you know, goddess this experience up to the max. It's
It's it is like one of the most sacred experiences in a person's life, right?
yeah,
You're bringing a new being onto the planet. This is so
yeah.
big and sacred, even more so than, let's say, a marriage ceremony. And nobody thinks twice about, I'm going to go over the top for my wedding. Like, I'm going to make everything perfect and beautiful for me. Like, of course you should. It's such a special day for you. And like to the max for your birth too. It's even more special and even more sacred.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
such an amazing point. And I think it really, yeah, such an amazing point. I'd never even thought about it like that, but it's so true. And the other thing that speaks to me when you described it, it's like, yes, bringing a new life in is such a sacred experience, and it's something beyond what we can know, or,
Yeah.
you know, we can do all the preparation and we can do all, you know, so many things, but we don't know what that is going to, we don't know that journey. And that's scary.
Yeah.
You know, that is scary. The journey itself is scary, and bringing another life in to take care of, like, that is so scary. And like, I think that one of the things that really supported me in this journey is a lot of the work that we've been doing on the training that we're on, which is giving tools of resourcing to be able to face those scary things, the things that are painful, the things that are hurt, exploring areas, you know, that are tricky. And by resourcing heavily, and in my experience, like, the wild was such an incredible support to me with that, as well as all the pleasure elements, the, you know, decorations, the you know, the nourishing gifts from friends, all of those things, and also the way that I was using my body. Yeah, like, and also, sorry, one more bit that I want to add to that, with what you were talking about with moving the energy. Like, this is so key, because I think the other thing that we're sort of conditioned towards is to fear intensity, to fear intense emotions, to stuff them down, and to run away from pain.
Yes.
And yeah, and it's like, actually, and I know that you speak about this in Inspired French, you know, when you can lean into that edge, because we're going through this transformational experience in birth, you know, this is an initiation, this is a rite of passage. Like, those things do not come without intensity and without pain. But if we can recognize them as a point of alchemic transformation, then we can also lean into them and allow them to, you know, surrender into them and allow them to transform us in a way that will, you know, bring ease
That's
and
a
love.
huge piece. That's a huge piece. Oh my gosh.
Sweetheart is getting
So,
tired now.
all right, we'll wrap it up, Silver. I'll give you back your mommy in just a sec. And just one, that is a huge piece, because when you're resisting the intensity, not allowing the energy flow, you're not allowing the blood flow in your own body. And so what that does is it makes your body actually have to work so much harder to open. And in working harder, that kicks up the intensity, which kicks up the pain, which kicks up the fear, which kicks up the resistance. And a lot of people will downward spiral there. So leaning into the intensity, as counterintuitive as that is, like we don't really learn that in our culture. We're taught to like numb, avoid, manage in all these different ways. But if you can practice in whatever way you can, like leaning into intensity. I mean, COVID is the perfect opportunity. Holy cow. I don't think there's a person on the planet that hasn't experienced some kind of intensity in relation to the situation we're in right now. And so just starting to notice like your own patterns in relation, like, do you prefer to just check out, numb out, or are there gifts here for you? I know there are so many gifts in this time. And if we can look at it as, I'm getting a little off track here, but I have to say, if we can look at it as like a global rebirth, like this is our intensity to really like lean into and release all that's not serving us so that we can create anew, much like you are leaning into intensity so that you can birth a new soul onto the planet. So beautiful, Charlotte, really so sacred. And I was thinking a little bit about your relationship with nature and, you know, as us as energetic beings and how much support we can actually get from nature in our physical bodies. And that's another beautiful place for people to explore, you know, just something as simple as like leaning up against a tree, noticing what that does to the sensations in your body. To me, I would describe that as flow. It supports flow. And so that image of you on the ground, like literally turning it over to Mother Earth, it's like she's supporting that flow. She's supporting moving that energy through your body so you can have this blissful, ecstatic, divine experience.
That's absolutely it. And I think this is something that, you know, I'm really wanting to bring. I'm so glad that you brought that up in the conversation. It's like, you know, we are nature. We are one. It's not, there's no separation. It's not just going and spending time in nature. You know, spending time with ourselves, spending time with our own bodies. This is us also spending time with nature. And in this time where everything is fragmented, we're losing so many of our support structures, connecting with other people. This is a time I think that is really calling us to return to the land, to return to the wild, and actually allow these, you know, these beings, these are our elders, you know, the trees, the land, the fire, the elements, the wind, like these are the elements in existence that have been there for so much longer and know so much more. And I think we've been taught that, you know, our brains are like these almighty beings that can kind of like, you know, think our way through any situation. But, you know, when it comes to birth, this is like divine creation that is going on. And I think, you know, when I was experiencing my first pregnancy, I was overwhelmed with this feeling of like, my body knows how to make a baby. Like, this is the biggest creation of my life, and I'm not having to think about this at all. Like, this is like, you know.
Yeah, I can so relate to that. I had that same thought when I first, that was actually the thought that propelled me to want to have this natural primal birth experience. Like, oh my God, look at this. My body knows just what to do. This is amazing. So there is really, that is the moment where you realize, as you said, like you are nature, your body is nature. And the more you can like really reconnect with that, you know, one of the things I always say is you can't think your way through birth. You have to be in your body. You have to feel your way through birth. You have to let your body lead you.
And to surrender, like surrender, letting go to that which is so much greater than us. And it, you know, that can be hugely scary. And, you know, I just want to honor all of those that have had really challenging birth stories as well, and traumatic ones, and also just like bring a flame of light to all of us about our possibility for healing on a personal level, on a global level, on an earth level, and like the interconnectedness of all of this. And it's so much, there's so much actually that I would love more to talk about this.
You and I could talk for hours, I think. I don't think Silver would like us very much. But, you know, I think where you're going with that is that, you know, there's darkness in every experience too. And a lot of people do experience darkness in birth. And so one of the ways, you know, in a lot of the ecstatic birth programs, we talk about that is in every birth, there's two births. There's a birth of the baby and there's the birth of the mother. And in the birth of the mother, just like when you're physically birthing a baby, there will be, there might be contractions along the way. And I know for me, when I had my traumatic birth experience, that was like the first contraction of many that led to my rebirth, to my reclaiming my relationship with my body, to doing this work. And so for those people, when you're in that contractive space, it's really hard to be able to see that when you're in that like deep contractive space. So just to know that like the rhythm of birth, the rhythm of life, the rhythm of orgasm is always contraction and expansion. And the contractions exist literally for the expansion. So if that can be a light in the heart of anybody that's having a hard time in pregnancy, in birth, that's one piece of wisdom I can offer. And actually, this is very synchronistic because tomorrow I'm offering a guest teacher masterclass with Christina Marassi on the dark feminine. And she's someone who, she's a pleasure-based business coach, but spent years, like 2 to 3 years, unraveling, allowing herself to unravel into the arms of the dark feminine and really explore the depth there and the power that lies there. And so in tomorrow's guest teacher masterclass, we're really going to be learning about how to do that. Like when you're in that dark space, instead of like resisting it, instead of fighting it, how do you run towards it? How do you embrace it? How do you start to dive deep to get the gifts that are there for you? Because they're always there.
That sounds amazing.
Charlotte, thank you so much. Is there anything that you wanted to share that you didn't get to before we close?
I actually feel so much as well. Like, there's so much, really. Just one small piece that I would like to share, because I revisited it today actually, with an amazing interview that I heard from midwife Dakini from Germany. And this was one thing that helped me in the preparation for my birth, when she was talking about, well, she was talking about the cervix, which was absolutely blowing my mind, but also about the hormones that we get in birthing being the same. So with contractions and in birthing, the same as in orgasm and the same as in death, we are getting this concoction of serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin, and DMT.
Yeah.
And this is like full of, like, this is good stuff. And yeah, like, how can we come back to that wild and actually claim this, incredibly sacred and sensual experience of birthing? Like, we are all expressions of divine creation. This is our essence. And I think that how can we bring this back into our birthing experience, allowing ourselves to surrender into this essential nature of our being. And I think that was just on a final note, that was really my North Star in my birthing experience. This was where for me, it was a devotional act. It was a devotional act to the Great Spirit and the Great Mother. And it was in surrender of myself, and, with no knowing of where this birthing journey could take me, but just being able to surrender into that. And there's so much more that I could say and share, but it's it's a deep journey, and I think it's a blessed and a terrifying one for many people, and we do not know where it will take us, but there is so much power in the experience. I think I'm mincing my words a little bit, because I'm also wanting actually just to pay homage to my dear cousin who I journeyed through pregnancy with, who actually lost her baby in the moment of birth. And I am just bowed in humility to her experience. And I have a candle actually honoring Ayumi, her daughter. We don't know where it will take us, and there is so much, and life is so precious and sacred. And I just I hold her completely in my heart, and all of those that have had traumatic
Yeah.
birthing experiences. But I also really feel that sharing a birthing story that was like so empowering and so connecting for me and for all of the people that were there with me, I just hope that it can also bring hopes of what is also possible. And it's like enough already.
Get in his
You're
2
right,
cents.
Mama. You're right, Mama.
Yeah, I'm so sorry to hear about your cousin's experience, and I can feel the, you know, like the pain and the loss there. And that's that that we were talking about, you know, that there's light and there's dark, and the feminine, we're really in this place of reclaiming like feminine from a place of power and beauty and pleasure and flow. But in order to reclaim all of that, we also have to reclaim the grief and the loss and the anger, because I think of it as like an accordion, right? It's like you can, if you can't feel like this side of it, you can only feel this much, right? This being the pain and this being the pleasure. And when you expand your capacity, it all expands. And so I think that's where, you know, you were talking about like the devotional act, and you were talking about like the surrender to the great mother. We never know, right? Every day, like we never know. And so that's the devotional act, is like always like really fully showing up, not knowing, and surrendering in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was a reality. I'd had this knowledge just a couple of weeks before giving birth, and it was something I'd never considered as a possibility, you know. And
How did you process that ahead of your birth? I didn't realize that was right before your birth.
yeah, it was right before my birth, and obviously, I mean, absolutely devastating. You know, and we're still all feeling the heartbreak. And my doula actually was amazing. She sent me a gift. She sent me this rose quartz crystal, which I've actually passed on to a friend now who really needed that extra support. She just lost her mother, and it was a palm stone, that a rose quartz stone, and it was you know, rose quartz is the stone for the heart. It's a heart opening. She wrote a note with it that said courage. The word courage comes from the French word for heart, la cour. And we think of courage, you know, maybe as this quite, you know, warrior type of spirit, but it's also, it feels, it's like a heartfelt experience. And she said, this stone, you know, you can hold it by your heart. And I did. And I held it. I was, you know, every night feeling this experience of my cousin, you know, just so deeply. And I held this stone and I held it by my heart. And I think like all I can say and how I processed it was just like more surrender, and, you know, feeling all those things, weeping the tears, you know, talking it through with my doula, talking it through with my mother, talking it through with my husband, and knowing that there are no certainties in birth. I would also, you know, I had my plan B and C if things, you know, if things got tricky in my birth. I knew I'd gone to the hospital. I knew what that looked like. I met as many of the people there as possible. Like, I'm not just saying go and birth on your own in the dirt. Like it can be, you know, things can happen. We can really need the support of medical teams. And I think, but I also really made a conscious choice not to let fear overtake my experience and what I knew was possible. And it opened my mind and my eyes to what else was possible, a dark side that I hadn't, you know, in all honesty, we're so protected in so many ways at the moment that we almost don't consider it as a possibility.
Yeah.
But it was, you know, it became an incredibly real thing. And even in birthing, I knew this was a possibility. And actually, the midwives arrived just before Silver did, literally just minutes before he did. So thankful and blessed to say that, you know, when his little head popped out and I was on all fours, he cried immediately. And I knew, you know, that he was okay. But one thing that I'd really chosen as well in my experience, and it's through the practices that I have been lucky enough to have been exposed to and have to practice, to be able to choose that this process for me was an act of devotion, and it was an act of letting go, and all the things that I had been afraid about in the whole journey, I had spoken about them, I'd voiced them, and I knew that they were there, but they were not going to like be the overriding thing. Like in this moment, I allowed myself to be fully present in what was happening.
Yeah. And that's so important, because if you don't look at those fears, they can overtake your birth. They can control your birth. So when you really look at them and you plan and as best as you can, you know, that you have the support, any of these things that you're worried about does happen, then you're more able to surrender fully to your body.
Yes, absolutely. We have to feel these things. We can't just turn around and say, oh, I choose not to.
Yeah.
We have to feel them, and that's part of it. Like my experience with the surges, with the contractions, is I needed to feel them. I needed to feel them fully. I needed to, celebrate what they were doing inside of my body. Yeah.
I think he wants his mommy back.
He does. He's ready for bed.
You here for a very long time. We're going to let you go, Charlotte. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your story. And Silver also, it was really actually delightful to watch his face throughout and have him be here with us as you were sharing the birth story.
Thank you so much, Sheila. Thank you for having me, and thank you for the amazing work that you're doing and supporting women to have ecstatic birth experiences. It's so valuable.